Yeah.
Right, we've essentially done 3 national projects. We've done one EU-wide one, so it seems logical in a sense that we should finish by sort of going for the hat trick, going for the jackpot, I mean, and doing a worldwide one. So we're going to talk about the World Bank Open Knowledge Repository, open access with global development impact.
Thank you, Richard. Hi, everyone. I'm conscious of the timing of this presentation, given at the end of the day, and letting people get off as quickly as possible, or relatively quickly, I suppose. But I would like to... I'm Matt Howells, by the way, and I'm the manager of the technology team within the Office of the Publisher in the World Bank in Washington. Now, the publisher is not usually the person who advocates open access, but I'll show you in a few slides' time the World Bank is not a typical organization. Our presentation today is a joint effort, as our repository has been, with our developer Atmire, and Lieven will present a bit more about the technical elements of what we've done. And Tom, my colleague, who's the project manager for the delivery of our open access repository, he'll talk a little bit about the next steps for us in terms of what we hope to do with the repository itself. My part of the presentation, well, it's not very technical at all. I guess setting a bit of context and telling you why at the World Bank we're doing this seems like a logical first step before going into the more technical infrastructure elements. Okay. We live in a World Bank bubble in Washington, I'm not going to lie about that, and we think everybody knows exactly what we do. And so yesterday we came to the first day, and I was very conscious of listening to all the people from the UK and the universities, and I did realise that probably people are not fully aware, or perhaps not as aware as they could be, of what we do within the World Bank. What's our mission? Well, we're an organisation, international organisation, and we're huge, which is working towards relieving poverty. Very laudable, a very wonderful place to work too, with those aims. And we're certainly funding projects in the developing world. Now, those projects in the developing world are, not only are they aimed at helping agricultural, health, environmental developments, but they also deliver research outputs. And that's essentially one of the exercises the Office of the Publisher takes at the World Bank in terms of helping to publish those outputs. I'm going to say that I showed a slide which had an aircraft carrier next to the huge grey structure of the World Bank, and obviously there are some similarities in colour there. There are also some similarities in the fact that changing direction within the World Bank is not done quickly. It's done very slowly, but when it's done, it's really done. And I think this slide is testimony to that. In that, in 2010, the bank decided to really open itself up, and it was done under the umbrella of the arrows at the bottom, the access to information policy, and I use the word umbrella wisely in Edinburgh, it seems. And as you can see, it's made up of a number of elements, strategic objectives. Some of them are about making operations and project documents available, creating knowledge platforms within the bank that are also available externally. But I'm going to focus really, I guess, on the left-hand strand, which is the open data research and knowledge objective. Many of you, or some of you, may know that in early 2010, the bank not only launched its access to information policy, but it also launched an open data initiative with the objective of ensuring that as much bank data was available as possible, and that as much of it was as reusable as possible. In fact, we encourage everyone to use it and reuse it exactly as they wish, and we don't have any restrictions on its use. The lowest element here, the open knowledge part, took a bit longer. We knew in early 2011, we worked with Almus One from Key Perspectives that we were intending to launch an open access repository. But as I said, the World Bank is in many ways like an aircraft carrier. So everything moved very, very slowly to 2011. Until towards the end of 2011, we were given a very short deadline for actually delivery of the repository. I guess that's the danger of working in an organization like the World Bank. But in terms of the open knowledge agenda, the open access, I guess, repository at the World Bank, there are three sort of main elements to it. I'm going to talk mostly about the open access policy that we've implemented. I'm going to talk a little bit about the adoption of the Creative Commons license, and Tom will talk a bit more about the fundamentals of our open knowledge repository, which we launched in April. The open access policy was launched on July the 1st, last week, and in essence that's a mandate internally for, and I'll go on to the next slide, that it's a mandate for all staff within the bank that they should, if they publish internally with the bank, deposit all their manuscripts and accompanying data sets that relate to their research in the open knowledge repository. We have some internal processes and kinks to work out in terms of actually getting the material into the repository itself, but it's an internal mandate. So, as I said, when the World Bank makes a decision, it really makes a decision. So everything that's published by the Office of the Publisher is fully available within the open access repository. The policy also applies to externally funded research, and we are currently in discussions with various publishers about the embargoes that are associated with that material. There are a huge number of researchers and economists within the bank, and they not only want to publish internally with the Office of the Publisher, as prestigious as that is, but they also have the need to publish with commercial publishers. So the policy does apply to this material, and at the moment we're working through how we negotiate embargoes with the bigger publishers in the economics area. Okay, I think I've clarified some of this already, but in terms of the material that we publish, everything that we publish within the Office of the Publisher, everything that we publish has to be deposited on the OKR, the Open Knowledge Repository. And everything that we publish is available under CC-BY. Now, as I said, there are some small kinks and issues to work out with material published externally, but the author-accepted manuscript will need to be deposited on the OKR with the metadata. We will make that internally available through our repository implementation, and after the publisher's embargo has expired, we'll also make that externally available. And that is available under the not-so-glamorous CC-BY-NC-ND license. So, I mean, I wanted to set a sort of a why question. You know, why did we adopt an open access policy within the bank? Well, the bank took the brave step to modernize itself and to open itself up in 2010. So, in terms of adopting an open access policy, we're aligning ourselves with that open development agenda. We're, I guess, acting on the requirements to make the research which is about countries all around the world available as widely as possible. We want to make it as used and reused as possible, so in as innovative ways as possible, much like our Open Data Initiative. So we're making the Creative Commons license as liberal as we can. We want to join your community, so that's one of the other objectives. And in terms of within our community, I guess, within the IGO community, we want to be the first. We want to lead that community in terms of implementing open access, and indeed, I guess, put some pressure on them to join us. Okay. I'm going to explain a term here. We wanted to make our content as widely available as possible. Now, we want it available to researchers and students, policy think tanks, policy makers. Here's the term here, Part 2 countries, and that's That's a World Bank parlance, I'm afraid. And I will explain, you're a world that's full of acronyms, it seems, from yesterday. Part 1 countries within the bank are countries that donate, that provide donations. And Part 2 countries are countries that we lend to. And ostensibly they're the developing world countries. As I said, there's also an internal market within the bank for this content. And since the research has not up to now been collected in a single place, there are authors within the bank or economists within the bank who don't currently have access to the widest range of content that may be available in another office or in another part of the bank. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we were a traditional publisher. Till 2 years ago, we were a very traditional publishing office within the World Bank, and we had very traditional views on copyright, and everything was done on a all rights reserved basis. Through embracing the open access, my manager calls it drinking the open access Kool-Aid. You have to be an American, I guess, to get it. But we want everyone to take the bank content and use and reuse it as they wish. So we publish the material that we publish is available under CC BY to make it as reusable in derivative forms as much as they like. And obviously we have adopted the other slightly more restrictive license for material that we don't own the rights to, but for material where the researchers have written and then published with commercial publishers. I think I've given you a kind of context about why we adopted open access at the bank and why we built the repository which we built. I'm now going to hand over to Tom Breineder, who's my colleague within the World Bank Office of the Publisher, and he's been the project manager who's led our initiative, and he'll talk a little bit more about how the repository itself was implemented.
Hi everyone. I'm going to talk very quickly about two things. One is what is typically included in our OKR, and the second part is about the next steps we have for future developments. The first part, for the content, we typically hold bank publications, formal books, as well as ECWs, which are economic and sector works. These are typically analytical reports mandated by the bank before lending funds can be initiated. The third content set is working papers, which are basically works in progress which are published to facilitate the sharing of ideas. As Matt mentioned earlier, we also publish journal articles, both published within the bank and externally, as well as research done by country offices. For future developments, we do aim to include more legacy content. Currently, we're limited to going back in time to 2005, and we're hoping to reach back into the year 2000 by the end of financial year 2013, which is typically in June for us. Another project which is currently underway is recovering lost content within the bank, content which has never been published externally or even cataloged anywhere. As far as new development goes, we are focusing currently on author profiles, which will not only include author identification, possibly ORCID, but also using author name variants and configuring that. We are launching a new revised submission workflow, which is tailored to the needs of the publishing units in the bank to facilitate that process and make it easier for our internal staff. And the third and probably most prominent part to the end user is including advanced usage stats. So not only downloads and page views, but also displaying them in a way which makes it more apparent for developing countries to know which are the most pertinent articles available to them and how often they were downloaded within their local region. The last phase, which will happen probably towards the end of this year or early 2013, is integration with bank systems, which would allow us to cross-reference data files, to link research content to the final research publications, and also to update our taxonomies according to the next versions. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Lieven, who heads Atmire, our development partner for the OKR.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, I'm going to talk about two implementation challenges. The first one is integration. It's going to be talked about very briefly, and then about the search infrastructure, faceted search, and how that relates to taxonomies. Some of the integration challenges that we still are facing, we're currently doing requirements analysis and we're in the planning stage, is that this open source software platform, it's built on DSpace, will have to run within the bank on WebSphere, which is an enterprise server rather than what is traditionally used for DSpace's Tomcat, which is open source. We need to integrate with Documentum, which the bank uses to capture all the internal content. And we need to integrate with the bank's main website and their search interface. And then finally also with SiteMinder to do authentication and authorization, but all of that is for late fall. As of right now, the OKR runs in the cloud, so everything is cloud-based and the content comes from Documentum and other sources, but is currently done as a batch export-import procedure. Something that we've also done work on, and I want to specifically mention this, is because so with the open development agenda at the bank, we have also talked about them joining the community, and not only the open access community, but also the open source community. So the bank is contributing code to DSpace in open source that is developed by Atmire. And one of those things is, for instance, the faceted search. Just a very brief introduction about what faceted search is. So in this case, we've done a search query for the keyword Vietnam that produced 118 search results. And in the left sidebar, you see the search facets, which are basically the most popular metadata values for the content that you have in your search results. To explain it in a little bit more detail, we'll zoom in on, for instance, the author facet, which is fairly simple. So in this case, this means that Wagstaff Adam has published, occurs in 10 items in the list of 118. That is basically what faceted search is. When you click on the author's name, it will apply that as a filter, and it will filter down your search results to only the items where Wagstaff Adam has been an author. But this creates a problem for taxonomies, and I'll explain why. So this is an example of a taxonomy within the bank topics. And as you all know, taxonomies change over time. They evolve, certain topics change in the structure itself might change. So that of course creates a problem for browsing the repository. If you want to browse a repository, traditionally we would do a browse by topic, and you would be presented with that hierarchical list. You click on a topic and then you would see everything associated with that topic. But what if in the meanwhile the taxonomy has changed, meaning that that particular topic might not be in that exact location in the tree anymore, so you might miss some content. So to do that in the metadata, in DSpace, you store the whole hierarchy. So in this case, we're talking about energy production, transportation, and energy as a super topic, and energy is also stored in the metadata. So the hierarchical taxonomy value is mapped completely onto the item metadata, which also allows you to, if the taxonomy changes, to go back to your metadata and change and update all the hierarchy. Now, as I said, faceted search just looks at how many times is this value for how many items in your search results does it apply. So, and what you see, for instance, in this case is that you see on the top side, you see health, nutrition, and population with 22 items. And then you see the subtopic health, nutrition, and population with subtopic population policies that also has 18 items in the search results. So, and thinking back to the author, the faceted search only looks at the value itself and has no idea of what the hierarchy in the taxonomy is. It doesn't take the hierarchical structure of the taxonomy into account, which basically creates a problem. To look at that in a little bit more detail, I gave another example on agriculture. So you have agriculture, which is the super topic that has 4 items associated to it, and then pest management, fisheries and agriculture, aquaculture, and agricultural research that have 1, 1, and 2 items, right? And this is a direct link between the topic and the item. So this basically means that there are actually more than 4 items under the topic agriculture, because all the other items in the subtopics are also part of agriculture. And it creates an additional problem in the sense that if I would ask you how many items do we have with the topic agriculture, most people would say 8, because 4 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 is 8. Now, in reality, the first 2, agricultural research and pest management basically belong to the same item, both occur in one item. So which means that the total is 7 and not 4 or 8. And in addition, when you click on agriculture, you would only see the bottom 4 items that are directly associated with the topic agriculture and none of the subtopics. So we saw this problem and we thought of a first step towards a solution, because of course solution is never perfect. But just to go back and revise very quickly, so the taxonomy facet basically lists all the topics at any level of the tree. And shows the number of items that are associated with one particular node in the tree, but only one. So, like I said, the problem is it doesn't take into account the hierarchical structure of the taxonomy, and it is, on top of that, also counterintuitive. When you filter by a topic, items related to subtopics are not shown. So what is the behavior that we would like to see? And this is something that is part of the next step, so we only list the topics at the top level of the tree. But we show the number of items that are associated with the top level topic and all of its subtopics. If the item contains multiple topics, as you've seen in the example, it will be only counted once. And it's much more intuitive, because when you click on a certain topic and filter by it, items related to that subtopic are in fact included. And the situation changes to where when you would click on agriculture in this scenario, you would see all 7 items. As I mentioned, this is a contribution to the next version of DSpace, a generous contribution by the World Bank. It includes taxonomy support for the XML UI so that you can submit your content and add taxonomy values to it. And then this improved support for taxonomies in faceted search. Now, I talked about next steps in the sense that a solution is never perfect. So nor is this one. So right now the sidebar facet only lists the top level topics, which is useful because you can immediately filter into on a bigger level which topics you want to take a look at. You can also go to a list of all the topics if you want to, but that's not shown in the sidebar facet because the space there is limited, and what we need is a way to drill down further into the subtopics once you've selected a certain topic. And for that purpose, I'm just quickly showing you a brief view on a prototype that Atmire is doing for the new discovery search infrastructure, where you basically have a multi-indexed browse and where you can see that you have a search operation here going on right here, and you see on the bottom section, you see that we actually have 1,068 search results that match a particular query. On the right-hand side, you still see the facets and the topics, but then when you click on Show All, it will actually open up a tab on the top of the page that will show you all the topics in a hierarchical way, and you can click and filter on any topic in the hierarchy and include all the subtopics. And I'm keeping it a little bit shorter than was planned. And if you have any questions, first of all, I'd like to thank you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask whether you are aware that the World Bank has funded institutional repositories in what you called Part 2 countries. Would there be any chance of having these repositories in developing countries kind of showcased within their own World Bank repository? Thank you.
I'm going to leave that question to Matt, and yes, we are aware of that situation.
Certainly the intention is to
starting our outreach in Africa. That's the first place we're going in terms of in terms of looking for.
Sorry, it's for the recording.
Okay. In terms of looking for the content and also gaining access to these repositories. So, yes, but I would stress that we're pretty stretched doing this in the short term in terms of the next phase. But we're certainly working on outreach with Africa in the short term and then going beyond that.
And in addition to that, South America and Colombia.
Well, if there aren't any more, can I ask you both to thank the presenters of this particular delve into the world of repositories, but also, in fact, a final thank you to all the presenters this afternoon, and indeed yourselves for sitting so long and so patiently. Thank you very much indeed, all of you.